There comes a moment in every life when the noise of youth begins to quiet, and what remains is the echo of the choices we once made in silence. Old age is not simply a destination we arrive at. It is a reflection we grow into, shaped by the habits we repeated, the words we swallowed, the risks we avoided, and the truths we delayed. Many people wait too long to ask the right questions, only to discover that time has a way of answering them without mercy. If you listen closely, life is always whispering lessons meant to protect your future self from pain, from regret, and from unnecessary suffering. Today is one of those moments where those whispers deserve your full attention, because the four things you are about to hear are not just advice. They are the quiet foundations of a life that ages with strength, dignity, and peace. The habits you ignore today do not disappear into silence. They settle quietly into your life and begin to shape it in ways you may not recognize until much later. In youth, it is easy to believe that time is generous, that the body will always recover, that opportunities will always return, and that tomorrow will offer what today refuses. Yet time, though patient, is never indifferent. It records everything with an honesty that does not bend to excuses or delay. Each small decision, each neglected responsibility, each moment of avoidance becomes part of a larger pattern that, over the years, builds the very reality you must one day live within. There is a subtle weight in repeated neglect. It begins as something barely noticeable: skipped discipline, postponed effort, ignored health, unspoken truths. But these small omissions do not remain small. They gather strength in the shadows of habit, forming structures that quietly guide your outcomes. By the time old age arrives, these patterns no longer feel optional. They feel fixed, like walls you cannot move. The body that was not cared for begins to ask for attention in louder ways. The mind that was not trained in patience or reflection becomes restless. The finances that were not managed begin to restrict freedom. What once seemed like harmless delays reveal themselves as limitations that require endurance to bear. And yet, within this truth lies a powerful responsibility. For if habits can become burdens, they can also become protections. The same quiet repetition that builds regret can, when chosen with intention, build strength, stability, and peace. It is not the grand gestures alone that define a life, but the consistent, almost invisible choices made day after day. Discipline, though often misunderstood as restriction, is in fact a form of kindness toward your future self. It is the decision to act now so that you do not suffer later, to prepare now so that you do not struggle unnecessarily when your energy is not as abundant as it once was. Old age does not arrive suddenly. It unfolds gradually, revealing the truth of what has been cultivated over time. If you live with awareness, you begin to understand that every habit is a seed. Some seeds grow into strength, resilience, and independence, while others grow into fatigue, limitation, and regret. The difference lies not in fate, but in attention. To ignore your habits is to surrender your future to chance, but to observe and guide them is to take ownership of the life you are steadily creating. So the question is never only about what you are doing today, but about what those actions are becoming over time. Because one day, when the pace of life slows and reflection becomes unavoidable, you will meet the sum of your habits, and in that meeting, you will either find comfort in the care you once gave yourself, or you will confront the consequences of what you chose to overlook. Money, in its quietest form, is not merely a tool of survival, but a measure of how thoughtfully a life has been lived. Financial discipline is not about restriction or denial. It is about awareness, restraint, and the understanding that every choice made today carries forward into the shape of tomorrow. In youth, when energy is abundant and the future feels distant, It is tempting to spend without reflection, to prioritize immediate comfort over long-term security, and to treat income as something that will always replenish itself without consequence. Yet the truth reveals itself slowly, as it often does, not in sudden moments, but in the accumulation of years where patterns have already taken root. There is a quiet dignity that comes from knowing you have prepared for your own future. It is not loud or visible in ways that demand attention, but it is present in the freedom to make choices without fear, in the ability to respond to life's uncertainties with steadiness rather than anxiety. When financial discipline is practiced early, it creates a foundation that supports not only independence, but peace of mind. It allows a person to age without the constant weight of regret tied to missed opportunities, unpaid obligations, or habits of excess that were never brought under thoughtful control. Without discipline, money tends to slip through the fingers of even the most well-intentioned individuals. It is not always large, careless decisions that create difficulty, but rather the repetition of small, unexamined ones. The unnoticed expenses, the delayed savings, the avoidance of planning, these seemingly minor choices begin to gather influence over time. As the years pass, what once felt manageable may begin to feel restrictive, and the absence of preparation becomes more apparent. In old age, when energy is not as abundant and opportunities to rebuild may be fewer, the consequences of earlier financial habits become clearer, often leaving individuals dependent, constrained, or burdened in ways that could have been avoided. Financial discipline, however, is not built in a moment of urgency, but in a consistent practice of mindfulness. It is the decision to respect your resources, to understand your needs versus your wants, and to align your spending with your long-term values rather than temporary impulses. It asks for patience, the willingness to delay gratification, and the humility to recognize that true security is not found in abundance alone, but in how wisely that abundance is managed. When you carry financial discipline with you through the years, you give your future self the gift of stability. You create a space where aging is not accompanied by constant concern over survival, but instead by the freedom to focus on relationships, reflection, and the quieter aspects of living. In this way, money becomes more than currency. It becomes a reflection of responsibility, foresight, and self-respect. And in the later chapters of life, these qualities reveal their true value, not in what they display to others, but in the peace they return to the one who practiced them long before they were needed most. Health is not something that arrives by chance and stays without care. It is quietly constructed through the choices repeated each day, often in moments that seem too small to matter. In youth, the body may appear forgiving, allowing long hours of neglect to pass without immediate consequence, creating the illusion that resilience is endless. But the body, much like a patient recorder of time, remembers everything: the skipped rest, the unbalanced meals, the stress carried without release, the movement denied, and the care postponed. What is overlooked today does not vanish. It accumulates, slowly shaping how the body responds in the years that follow. There is a natural tendency to treat health as something that can be restored quickly whenever it is lost. Yet true well-being is not built in urgency, but in consistency. Each day offers an opportunity to either support the body or strain it further. The foods chosen, the hours of sleep respected, the moments taken to move, breathe, and reset. These are not separate from life. They are life itself unfolding in physical form. When these elements are neglected, the body begins to carry a quiet burden that may not be immediately visible, but over time it reveals itself through fatigue, discomfort, and reduced vitality. As the years progress, the difference between those who cared for their health and those who did not becomes more apparent. It is not only about strength or appearance, but about endurance, mobility, clarity of mind, and the ability to engage with life without constant limitation. A body that has been consistently supported tends to respond with stability, while one that has been repeatedly ignored may begin to demand attention in ways that require greater effort to manage. Old age, in this sense, does not create weakness on its own. It often uncovers the patterns that were established long before. Yet within this understanding lies a quiet opportunity. Because health is built through repetition, it can also be improved through the same steady commitment. It does not require perfection, but it does require awareness and respect. Listening to the body, giving it rest when it signals exhaustion, nourishing it with balance rather than excess, and allowing it movement instead of stillness for too long. These are simple acts, but they carry lasting impact. They are not dramatic changes, but they are consistent ones, and consistency is what the body responds to most faithfully. In later years, when energy is no longer as abundant and recovery takes more time, the value of these daily choices becomes undeniable. A life that has been supported through mindful habits often carries a sense of ease, where the body serves as a reliable companion rather than a constant source of struggle. In this way, health becomes more than physical condition. It becomes a reflection of care given over time, a quiet testament to the discipline and awareness practiced when it mattered most. The relationships you choose to nurture today do not remain fixed in the present. They grow, evolve, and eventually stand beside you in the later seasons of life, when companionship is no longer optional but essential. In youth, connections can feel abundant, even effortless, as time, energy, and shared circumstances bring people together without much intention. Yet as life unfolds, paths begin to diverge, priorities shift, and only those relationships that were tended with sincerity, respect, and consistency tend to endure beyond convenience. What is given to others in patience, understanding, and care often returns in forms that are not always immediate, but deeply meaningful when they are needed most. There is a difference between simply having people around and truly building bonds that hold weight over time. Superficial interactions may fill moments, but they rarely provide the depth required to sustain a person through the quiet challenges that accompany aging. The relationships that matter most are those rooted in trust, where honesty is practiced without fear, where presence is shown not only in celebration, but also in difficulty, and where effort is not conditional upon ease or benefit. These connections are not built overnight. They are shaped through small, consistent acts of kindness, listening, and mutual respect that accumulate into something enduring. As time moves forward, the importance of these connections becomes more evident. There may come moments when strength is needed, not only physically but emotionally, when reassurance, understanding, or simply the presence of another human being can make the difference between isolation and comfort. In such moments, the relationships that were once taken for granted reveal their true value. Those who invested time and care into others often find themselves supported in return, not as a transaction, but as a natural outcome of shared history and genuine connection. Neglecting relationships, on the other hand, can quietly lead to distance that is difficult to bridge later. When communication is absent, misunderstandings are left unresolved, or appreciation is never expressed. Bonds can weaken over time. What once had potential to become a source of strength may gradually fade into familiarity without depth. And in the later stages of life, rebuilding such connections can require more effort than many anticipate, as time, circumstances, and emotional barriers have already shaped the distance between people. Nurturing relationships is not about maintaining a large circle, but about investing meaningfully in the ones that truly matter. It is found in the willingness to show up, to remain present even when it is not convenient, and to value others not for what they provide, but for who they are. In doing so, a person creates a network of genuine connection that extends beyond fleeting moments and into lasting support. And when life slows down as it inevitably does, it is these relationships that bring warmth, continuity, and a sense of belonging that cannot be replaced by anything else. Neglecting the body in the early chapters of life rarely announces itself with urgency. It often remains quiet, almost forgiving, as though time is allowing space for correction. But what appears forgiving is, in truth, patient observation. The body adapts, compensates, and continues to carry you forward, even when care is lacking. It endures irregular rest, poor nourishment, and prolonged stress without immediate complaint. Yet beneath that endurance, changes are taking place, subtle at first, then gradually more noticeable, as the years begin to reveal what was once ignored. What was postponed in youth does not remain suspended. It accumulates and eventually seeks attention in ways that can no longer be easily set aside. There is a moment in many lives when the realization arrives that the body is no longer responding with the same ease it once did. Movements that were once effortless begin to require intention. Recovery takes longer than expected, and energy does not replenish as quickly as before. In such moments, the consequences of earlier neglect become more visible, not as punishment, but as the natural outcome of years without consistent care. The body, having carried silently for so long, begins to ask for the attention it was denied, and this attention often requires more patience, discipline, and effort to restore than it would have required to maintain in the first place. This is why care given early holds a quiet but powerful significance. When the body is supported through balanced nourishment, regular movement, adequate rest, and mindful stress management, it builds a foundation that can sustain a person through the changing demands of life. These practices are not merely preventative, they are protective. They allow the body to remain resilient, adaptable, and capable of meeting age with steadiness rather than strain. In contrast, when such care is absent, the process of restoring balance later can feel more demanding, as the body must work not only to function, but also to recover from patterns that have long been established. There is no abrupt shift where neglect suddenly becomes visible. Rather, it unfolds gradually, revealing itself through accumulated experience. And in the later stages of life, when recovery is slower and energy is more limited, the difference between maintenance and neglect becomes clearer. Those who have consistently tended to their well-being often find themselves with greater ease in movement, clarity in thought, and stability in daily living. Meanwhile, those who delayed such care may find themselves navigating limitations that require ongoing attention and adjustment. In the end, the body reflects a history of choices made quietly over time. It carries the evidence of how it was treated, not in judgment, but in response. To care for it early is to honor the future you will one day inhabit, ensuring that when that time arrives, the body stands not as a burden to manage, but as a foundation that continues to support the life you have built. There is a quiet difference between simply growing older and continuing to grow as a person, and that difference is often determined by the willingness to keep learning. When learning slows or stops, life does not immediately lose its motion, but it gradually begins to lose its depth. The world continues to change, ideas continue to evolve, and perspectives continue to expand. Yet without the openness to engage with new knowledge, a person may find themselves standing still while everything around them moves forward. In youth, curiosity often comes naturally, driven by exposure, ambition, and the desire to understand. But as time passes, comfort can replace curiosity, and routine can quietly take the place of exploration, creating a life that feels familiar but no longer expanding. When learning is no longer a part of daily living, the mind can begin to settle into patterns that feel fixed and unchallenged. Conversations may become repetitive, interests may narrow, and the ability to adapt to new environments or ideas can slowly diminish. This does not happen all at once. It unfolds gradually, much like a path that is no longer being walked. Over time, the absence of new input can lead to a sense of disconnection, not only from the world, but also from one's own potential. Life begins to feel smaller, not because it truly is, but because the willingness to explore its breadth has diminished. Continuing to learn, however, keeps the mind active and engaged with the present moment. It invites growth not as a distant goal, but as an ongoing process that adds richness to everyday experience. Learning can take many forms: reading, listening, observing, questioning, or even unlearning what no longer serves you. Each of these acts contributes to a mindset that remains open rather than closed, flexible rather than rigid. This openness allows a person to adapt more easily to change, to understand others with greater depth, and to navigate life with a sense of awareness that grows over time. As years progress, those who continue to learn often carry a certain lightness in their perspective. They are not weighed down by the belief that they have already reached the limits of what they can know or become. Instead, they remain receptive, recognizing that every stage of life offers something new to understand. This approach not only enriches the mind, but also strengthens the sense of connection with others, as shared learning often becomes a bridge between different experiences and generations. In contrast, a life without continued learning can begin to feel confined within its own familiarity. The absence of growth can lead to isolation, not always in a physical sense, but in the inability to relate, adapt, or engage with what is unfolding around you. Over time, this can create a quiet distance between the individual and the evolving world they inhabit. Learning, therefore, is not merely an activity, but a way of remaining connected to ideas, to people, and to the ever-changing rhythm of life itself. Time moves in one direction, never pausing to return what has already passed, and in that steady movement, it quietly shapes every aspect of a life. Each moment is an opportunity that does not announce its value when it arrives, yet becomes meaningful in hindsight depending on how it was used. There is a subtle truth in the way time behaves. It does not demand attention, nor does it force decisions, but it reflects them with absolute clarity as the years unfold. What is chosen in the present becomes the foundation upon which the future is built. Whether that foundation brings ease or creates difficulty is determined not by time itself, but by the awareness with which it is lived. When time is treated with intention, it becomes a powerful ally. Moments are no longer seen as something to pass through without thought, but as opportunities to invest in growth, in relationships, in health, and in purpose. The hours that are guided with direction tend to produce outcomes that support stability and fulfillment later on. There is a quiet confidence that comes from knowing your time has been used in ways that contribute to your well-being, rather than being scattered without reflection. This kind of living does not eliminate challenges, but it equips a person with the strength and clarity to meet them with steadiness. On the other hand, when time is overlooked or taken for granted, it often slips away in fragments that seem insignificant in the moment. Delays become habits, distractions become routines, and important actions are postponed under the assumption that there will always be more time to address them later. Yet, as time continues its course, those postponed actions do not disappear. They accumulate into responsibilities that may feel heavier when finally faced. In this way, regret does not arrive suddenly, but grows gradually from repeated inattention to what could have been done when the opportunity was present. Regret is not always loud or immediate. It often appears quietly in moments of reflection, when a person looks back and recognizes the paths not taken, the efforts not made, or the chances that were allowed to pass without action. It is in these moments that the true value of time becomes more evident, not as something that can be controlled, but as something that must be respected. The realization that time was always moving, regardless of how it was used, brings with it an understanding that every decision carried weight, even when it seemed small at the time. Living with awareness of time encourages a different kind of presence. It invites a person to be more deliberate, to recognize that each day contributes to the larger picture of their life. There is no neutral ground where time can be paused without consequence. It is either being shaped into something meaningful through conscious effort or slipping away into missed opportunities that later become points of reflection. In this way, time continuously asks for participation, and the manner in which it is met determines whether it becomes a source of fulfillment or a quiet reminder of what could have been. Old age does not arrive suddenly as a separate chapter. It unfolds as the natural continuation of everything that has been practiced, believed, and prioritized along the way. The mindset carried through life becomes more visible with time, not because it changes overnight, but because it has been consistently reinforced through years of thought and behavior. The way a person interprets challenges, responds to setbacks, and views themselves in relation to the world begins to settle into patterns that grow stronger with repetition. In youth, there is often flexibility, a sense that perspectives can shift easily, but as time passes, those repeated inner dialogues become the framework through which life is experienced in later years. Discipline, too, reveals its long-term presence. It is not something that appears only when needed, but something that is built quietly through countless small decisions made when no one is watching and no immediate reward is guaranteed. The willingness to act despite discomfort, to maintain consistency despite distraction, and to remain committed despite uncertainty all contribute to a structure that supports a person over decades. When discipline has been practiced with care, it tends to provide stability in old age, allowing a person to navigate limitations with greater resilience and independence. When it has been neglected, however, the absence becomes more noticeable, as the effort required to manage daily life increases in ways that could have been eased by earlier consistency. Priorities, perhaps more than anything else, shape the direction of a life over time. What is placed at the center of attention, whether it is health, relationships, personal growth, or temporary indulgence, gradually determines the quality of the later years. Priorities are not always declared openly. They are revealed through how time is spent, how energy is directed, and what is repeatedly chosen over alternatives. As the years accumulate, these choices begin to form a clear picture of what truly mattered in practice, not just in intention. In old age, a person often looks back and recognizes that their present circumstances are a reflection of those long-standing priorities, whether they align with fulfillment or reveal areas that were overlooked. There is a quiet honesty in the way life mirrors these elements. The mindset that remained open or closed, the discipline that was upheld or neglected, and the priorities that were consistently honored all converge to shape the experience of aging. Old age, then, is not separate from the earlier stages of life, but deeply connected to them, carrying forward the evidence of countless decisions made over time. In this sense, it does not create a new identity, but rather brings into full view the one that was gradually formed, allowing a person to meet themselves as they have been becoming all along.